Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, and astrology is one of my favorite topics. I often branch out into other modalities at the same time, but for the most part, my show is about astrology. I've got a guest coming on today. We're going to be talking about Saturn and Neptune and its relationship to the rise of the law of attraction. Before we get started, though, I want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, you'll find a couple of paragraphs of mundane astrology as it applies to all of us on the planet, and then I branch out into the individual signs beyond that. I also include links to my podcast, links to my television educational series, and anything else that has pertinence to the time that we're in. And so I encourage you to do that. You can get there through my website, chrisflisher.com, or turningofthewheel.com. They both point to the same place, and I appreciate your support in that regard. Also, I myself I'm sort of the NPR of the astrology world here, and so therefore I need to have your input and your donations to help me keep the boat afloat, so to speak, and keep the wheel turning. So anything you can do in that regard is helpful. There's a donate button on my newsletter and also on my website as well. So without any further ado, let's get my guest on. It's Benjamin Bernstein. He is also known as the Astro Shaman, and we'll be talking today about his website is astroshaman.com, astroshaman.com. Benjamin Bernstein, and we're talking today about Saturn, Neptune, and the law of attraction. So, Benjamin, welcome to Turning of the Wheel. It's great to have you on. I've been trying to get you on for quite some time, so it's good that you're here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Chris. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so this is an interesting topic. I love it because I love the idea. I mean, it really does play right into that law of attraction because it's sort of a sense of a responsible psychological ability there that is fused with the two planets and the attributes that they bring to the table along with that sort of topic. So I think it's a great way to start the conversation.
Okay, cool. Yeah, here's how I think of them. Of course, they have many other things they represent, but in the law of attraction context, Neptune represents visualization and imagination, and Saturn represents crystallization and breaking it into 3D.
Yes.
And it's interesting. There are several books that are sort of the classics of law of attraction, and it turns out they were all published when Neptune and Saturn were making a quadrature aspect. So that quadrature, of course, is a conjunction, an opposition, or a square. Like the science of getting rich in 1910, the science of mind in 1926. That's when Neptune and Saturn were square. Think and Grow Rich, that classic by Napoleon Hill, came out when they were opposing. And even that book, The Secret, came out, got really super popular 2006 and 2007, and Neptune and Saturn were in opposition at that time. So fascinating how their quadrature aspects seem to correspond to when law of attraction sort of gets big in the public consciousness.
Yeah, and I like the idea of it because the whole basis for the law of attraction really is about shifting your perspective to generate a more positive and fruitful outcome. And I think that sort of speaks to the responsibility factor that Saturn sort of brings to the conversation. It sort of says, let's elevate this to a place where we're putting some real energy behind it to try to make our lives better. And I think that's very apropos for the sort of the symbolic attributes of Saturn as well as Neptune.
I agree. For me, it's a nice dance. I've learned that there's no two planets that cannot behave well together if you're just clever enough to bring them together. And in my own life, I've learned that it's better to let the outer planets lead.
Yes.
So in a case like this, we have, in other words, this law of attraction is an example of using Neptune and Saturn proactively from the ego.
Right.
And in this case, you're saying, okay, I'm going to manifest Neptune. I'm going to visualize what I want, really clear and vivid in my mind, all the details there. I'm going to hold really strong, powerful emotions to energize that visualization and make it come into reality faster. And then Saturn just says, okay, I'll work for Neptune. I'll just bring in whatever you're imagining.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, overall, just the general principle of using the outer planet to lead, because those are more of the archetypal divine transpersonal forces that, in my experience, it's better to be led by anyway.
Right.
Then the Saturn, Jupiter, the socials, and the other planets then can kind of harmoniously manifest what the divine leads with, and that's fabulous.
And
now, of course, law of attraction is very specifically an ego-based thing, but in my experience, I'm usually doing law of attraction on things that I got a divine inspiration to do anyway. The intuition kind of popped in, this would be a great direction to go in, and then my ego, in alignment with that, then starts bringing in the things that, were indicated broadly, and then the ego fine-tunes Saturn, says I'm going to organize it and put a system in it and develop a procedure and bring it into reality like that.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, I think because astrology is a dualistic modality, it always has that element of which way you're going to go with this sort of arrangement. You can go either way with this sort of Saturn-Neptune arrangement, but I think that if we err on the optimistic, positive side, which is what we should probably always try to do, we can see this really be a marriage of these two kinds of attributes and symbolic attributes, because they really do serve our greater good. If we're evolving in a way that's responsible and constructive and meaningful and expansive, that means that we're evolving in the proper, appropriate way. And then we can apply the sort of the subconscious quality of Neptune to that via Saturn, which then allows us to say, yes, we're doing something right. But of course, the opposite could always be true. But I think that's up to us to make that decision, that distinction, and try to harness what we can from that and aim it in the right direction.
I agree. Yeah. It's also interesting. It's not restricted to just the planets. I mean, I imagine many of your listeners know the idea of the astrology alphabet, where there's 12 characters, and you can get to any of those 12 letters of the alphabet through a planet, a sign, or a house. Mm-hmm. And let me just briefly, describe this in case someone isn't
Good idea.
familiar with it.
Yeah.
There's 12 houses and there's 12 signs. And the way most astrologers, including myself, interpret that first house, its keywords are pretty much the same as the sign Aries. That second house, its keywords are pretty much the same as Taurus, all the way around to 12th and Pisces. And then the final bit is you take the modern ruling planets and you plug them into the appropriate houses. And there you have the three ways to address any archetype. For example, first character, first house, Aries, Mars. Second character, second house, Taurus, Venus. Third, Mercury, Gemini, etc., all the way around to Pisces, Neptune, 12th. So the reason I'm bringing this concept forward is because, it's not just Saturn and Neptune. For example, if you have Saturn in the 12th house, which has the Pisces flavor, that can be law of attraction juice. If you have Neptune in the 10th house, which has that Capricorn Saturn flavor, that can bring in law of attraction juju. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different ways that this can play together. And I've also seen it doesn't even have to be just quadrature. I've seen people with powerful law of attraction by trine, by sextile, even quincunx, quintile. So there's all sorts of different flavors of it and different strengths. Some manifest more automatically. What I have seen is the hard aspects. In general, I see the hard aspects as where the game is played, whether it's a natal setup or a transiting planet. It's those quadratures that really make things happen in your life.
Yeah, I agree. It's always the steps. I think of them as steps. The 90-degree angles are steps in which they're part of our evolution. And so there is work involved in going up, climbing the stairs, if you use the stairs as a metaphor and the step as a metaphor. Climbing those stairs does require work on our part, which is part of our growth and evolution. And that's the same sort of thing. So as we evolve, we move up those steps. There's work involved, but that's what the work does yield a reward at the end.
Absolutely. So to continue that prior thought, if you've got Neptune and Saturn by quadrature, then law of attraction is working hard whether you want it to or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've seen over and over again I've tested this hundreds of times over the years. I mean, it's not scientific, but it's heavily anecdotal and heavily suggestive. So if I see a person with Neptune and Saturn in quadrature, I'll ask them, when you really want something, when you're just juiced up and excited about something, does it tend to show up in your life most of the time? And they'll almost always say yes. And I discover that's whether they're consciously desiring something they really want or whether they're just worrying a lot, because one of the law of attraction rules is worry becomes a sincere prayer for what you do not want.
Worry, yeah, that's an interesting thing. I have a quote on my I have a quote on my desk on a sticky note that says, "Worrying is using your imagination to create something you don't want," which I think
Exactly.
is just a great
Exactly.
quote. I love that because it really is. It's you're putting all this time and energy into something that you don't want. That sort of is your this demon in your head, and it's really wrong. So you've got to try to counteract that. And the best way to do that is to try to just shift your energy and your focus of your mind to things that are more positive and get that energy going in a different direction. The current placement of Neptune and Saturn puts a lot of the transiting planets that are coming through in a sort of a yod format at some point in time, right? The sort of the 150 degree of Saturn,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
at the time, and those are very powerful moments too. Especially over the last few weeks, they have been, as we've seen, Mercury, the Sun, Mars, and Venus all moving through that pattern to the other end, being the finger of the yod that's pointed out by Saturn and Neptune currently.
Yeah, right there in mid Leo.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's been super juicy. I agree with you.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. And so the idea of the law of attraction really is, it sort of goes back to, I mean, it's an interesting phrase that's used by, I guess you're referring to the Abraham Hicks people in that regard. I know there's been a lot of books that have written about that, but it really is about the sort of the power of positive thinking, ultimately, in trying to attract something to you, which is not this is a very old concept. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
the power, I mean, who was it? The Power of Positive Thinking. I forget his name, but there was a book going back in the 30s. I remember my father reading when I was a kid. I think it was, I forget his name, but I could find it easily. And it is about that sense of engagement and working towards, sort of trying to manifest what you want to attain.
Yeah, and actually, I have a lot of deep shamanic experience, and I've actually been shown in an ayahuasca ceremony how this actually functions, why your thoughts are so powerful at creating reality. Would it be okay for me to go on
Absolutely,
that?
I'd love to hear that. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, so this was years ago. I've done many, many ceremonies with ayahuasca and other plant spirit teachers, and I always get such fascinating teachings. And this one, I was shown by the wisdom of the plant that I was shown every thought in my mind that I was seeing in the vision state. Each little thought became a protoplasmic being and went out from me. And I was shown the only thing this little being wants to do is make physically real whatever that thought was.
Ah, interesting.
And I was also told, although in the ceremonial space you don't speak, the ayahuasca told me, and if you had spoken this, it would have been 100 times more powerful.
Interesting. So your experience was this. I'm interested to hear about your experience with ayahuasca and what it came to. So you were able to sort of actually see these thought patterns and sort of ascribe them to a character, and then how you acted with that character was how those would manifest.
Well, not precisely that, but again, this was just a brief moment in a multi-hour ceremony. It was almost like a sidebar note.
Okay.
The context of everything else that was happening, but just in altered space in a ceremony like this, there is enhanced vision. You were able to see not just in the 3D world, but into other dimensions, and it's really a little difficult to describe. But
it's a very Neptunian sort of experience, nonetheless, right?
Oh, very, very,
yeah, very
absolutely.
Neptunian and Plutonian, I imagine.
Yeah, Neptune rules spirituality and spiritual union, and Pluto is one of the planets that rules shamanism.
And
so
Neptune also rules, addiction and drugs and escapism. So they sort of do go hand in hand with the whole show. I'm curious what that was like for you. Did you happen to do it at a time when you had good transits or aspects?
I've done about 200 ceremonies, wow. And I really don't time them by transits. Basically, you just do a ceremony when the opportunity is right, like the shaman's coming to town or the day is right or whatever. And I haven't found, now again, if someone's interested, there are books by Ren Butler, R-E-N-N Butler, who goes deep into how to time your altered state journeys based on astrology.
Interesting.
He works closely with Stanislav Grof and Rick Tarnas. Mm-hmm. Those three are kind of tightly working together, and they have gone deeply into how do you, if you do a ceremony, any kind of altered state ceremony at a certain time with certain transits strong, then certain characteristic things are likely to happen. In fact, in his latest book, The Archetypal Universe, Ren goes into, he does all the planetary duo combinations and also triple combinations. And one of the sections in most of the descriptions is themes in deep self-exploration, where he describes some of the dream states or altered states that have actually been reported by people who did ceremonial space or altered space during particular transits. It's just fascinating.
I bet that is interesting. Yeah, and if you could time it you could actually do it in a way that would probably use that the influence of the planet in its highest elevated form. I'd imagine would be what you'd want to do, or at least in a good aspect to yourself, in order to generate a good outcome. And your experience with that has been though that when you were in this state of the ayahuasca state, were you able to sort of crystallize and identify where you were having these sort of this, like you talked about worrying before, how you were able to address that? Were you able to see that and sort of utilize that situation effectively?
I would say that the insight at the time was just about showing me the power of thought and the power of speech. I was already being pretty mindful about that, but I got even more mindful after that.
Yeah, I mean, so was it truly an eye-opening experience for you? Was it memorable in that regard and transformative?
What I would say is it just reinforced even more powerfully a path I was already on about really monitoring.
So you got validation right away of that sort of thing.
Yeah, what I find is that it requires, in my experience working with lots and lots of clients, what I call a base level awakening to be able to monitor thought. Because if you're not awake enough to have sort of a witness part that's watching the thought process, sort of as the higher level observer.
So you've got to sort of step outside. You've got to step outside of yourself and sort of look at yourself, even a detached mode. Then almost.
Yeah, but there's two parts of you in this state. You're sort of dual functioning because there's still the ego having the thoughts, and then there's this more awakened self simultaneously operating who's observing the thoughts.
I see. Yeah. So it's not a schizophrenic kind of a situation. You're just sort of
it's just more at the same time. One thing that I've progressively moved into as I've deepened my spiritual and shamanic journey is I can be many places at the same time. So my record at this point is holding 5 separate independent points of awareness simultaneously in physical and in altered state awareness. And it all happening just with no effort at all. It's just, you're just aware in 5 places at once. And it's just amazing and impossible even to conceive until you've really been there, in my experience, too.
Yeah, and I think even impossible to articulate, really, in terms that we would all be able to understand, because you really are in an altered state. And you're And
funny, I've come to view the normal human reality as the altered state because you're so cut off from so much of what you really are. But
that's pretty good, actually.
Whether it's through plant spirit or any other path, you become more aware of more of what you are. I believe that humans, when they're born, come under a veil of amnesia and they forget most of their reality being. And for me, the process of awakening has been stripping those layers of the veil away and becoming more conscious of more of what I really am and more of what we all really are.
And a lot of it's driven by distraction. There's no question about it. But I also think that we come to the planet as children, as babies. I think we have a certain sense of preloaded quality to us, where we sort of have inherent qualities and attributes and things that are passed down from generation. Part of our DNA mixture and all that as well. And we come in with a set of attributes that are sort of there, and it's just a matter of time and maturation for those to become cultivated and become real in our lives.
And of course, that's what the chart. That's what
the chart is all about.
We can see the blueprint in the chart, and we try to help people bring out the high side of it.
There's the instructions for everybody. But as a greater commentary from a mundane viewpoint, the idea of Saturn and Neptune in this sort of this sort of arrangement that we have going on currently, as well as going on into the time that we have. How it speaks to the law of attraction, I think, is interesting, because the law of attraction is something many people are struggling to achieve. They read the quotes, they read the books, they subscribe to things, and yet they come back and they say, gee, nothing's happening. What is it that is causing that disconnect? Is it lack of effort? Is it laziness? Or is it just wishful thinking that they just want to snap their fingers and say it's going to come to me because I read this book?
Well, I can speak to that on several layers. One is, I believe, my experience, again, as a shaman, I work a lot in the inner worlds. As an astrologer, I work in the external worlds. It's all blended together.
Yes.
But, we come with soul purpose. And, of course, the chart has lots of ways of showing that soul purpose. And I believe if someone is striving to make something manifest that's out of alignment with that soul purpose, it can be really tough to bring it about.
Right. That
I
would
mean,
be a devious expression of a good energy gone awry, perhaps, or just going aimed wrong, or something.
right. Now, yeah, with enough effort, they can probably do it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not serving their highest good, and it's difficult, and it's like pulling teeth, and sometimes something is manifest in the natal chart, but the timing's not right.
Right.
I mean, I'll give you an example from my own chart right now. In the moment, I'm doing a complete overhaul of my entire business model because I've got transiting Pluto on my midheaven ruler Venus, and I've got Uranus on my midheaven at the same time. And, always there was the potential for this shift of chart, but this is the most powerful career transit of my life. And I've been inspired to move I'm still going to do astrology and shamanic healing and stuff, but I'm going to add some membership groups and go to more one-to-many modality deliveries, because this is the time, if ever there is going to be one, if there's a time to make a radical shift in how I do business, it's now.
So you're going to try to be more of a one-to-many, meaning you're going to do webinars or do instructional videos or stuff like that, or try to make it into have a subscription service.
Well, the main thing is going to be a membership, mm-hmm. and there's two memberships. I'm actually right now firing up the astrology online mentoring group mm-hmm. That I'm going to be part of, and people can go to astroshaman.com and look in the blog posts. And for a while, it's going to be right there on the homepage in the fourth panel. They'll be able to see where I'm talking about that. And that, we're recording this in late August of 2019. It should be online. That group should be up sometime in September. And that's where I will be working, with a group of people. I'm the only one I know who's actually dividing the mentoring into three categories, sort of beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So you're only mentoring with people who are near your own level.
Right.
If others are doing it, I'm not aware of it anyway. And this way, I can work with a lot of people at once, and the mentoring is more rich and interesting to me because it's not just me talking, but the other students can also contribute their great ideas. And
right.
I've really seen when a lot of minds are at work on something, you get a much richer, more juicy understanding than if one person is the sole expert and it's just them laying it down.
Right, as opposed to just a talking head. This one is, when it becomes interactive, just the simple fact of the alchemy, so to speak, for lack of a better word, of two people fusing together, or many people fusing together, generates a dialogue unto itself, which wouldn't have existed had it not been for other people being there at the same time. So that whole process is fascinating. That's one of the beautiful things, joys of teaching astrology, or any modality for that matter, because you get that instant feedback and it sparks the new conversations, and it allows people to address the conversations and the topics on different levels through different angles. I love that idea.
Yeah.
And I think the idea that, the sort of getting back to your idea of the law of attraction and Saturn and Neptune in this arrangement really does have that sort of a character as an underlying theme to it, because it is all about sort of, we're at a point where we are trying to evolve to a much more a grounded level. We're going through an awful lot of turmoil, and it's been a long, hard, slow off to get there. But we are getting there very slowly. I think all the setbacks we've seen as of late in the world are necessary to sort of spark us on and try to drive away the apathy that becomes pervasive when people get distracted. And this is a time when the time really is ripe for this to happen, especially, I think, as Saturn eventually moves into Aquarius and then enters into the responsible mode of the great collective, which I think is what we really, and I think that during those years, as Saturn and Jupiter and eventually Pluto come into Aquarius, we're going to be able to see this collective, big responsible collective effort on all of our parts. To probably, I think the focus will be the climate, the planet, as something that we have to respond to. And I think Saturn will be the driving force behind that, saying this is a collective duty. We all own this planet, believe it or not, even though it doesn't seem that way. And since we all own the planet, we're all responsible for its stewardship and its health. So we have to rise to that occasion.
I agree. Yeah, for me, there's also a spiritual level of these slower planets moving into Aquarius, and my understanding of what human evolution is moving toward is sort of the next level beyond human is where many beings will be on a planetary body at a sort of a subtler, higher dimension. It'll be sort of physical, but more translucent. And two things will be happening at the same time. We will still have individual consciousness, but we'll also be sharing consciousness with all the other beings. So it's like every being on the planet will be a cell in the planetary brain. And part of the growth of the soul at that level is learning how to merge into a vastly greater consciousness with millions or even billions of other beings at the same time as holding an individual awareness.
Right, and you know, I mean, I don't know about you, but I thought for you, for sure, that we were on our way there back in the '60s. I really thought we were on our way to that sort of description that you just mentioned there. This sort of this collective, because I was living on a commune back in the '60s and '70s, and I felt as if we were really on the right road, the right path, and somehow we got sidetracked back then. It probably was just the time wasn't right.
Well, but that was, Uranus, Pluto, where we're driving that, and that was just the beginning of the cycle. That's when they were conjunct.
Yeah.
A few back in the mid 2010s, we had them square, and that was kind of bringing, that's the turning point where it goes to the next level.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's a very long-term play. These guys take a long time to conjoin again.
Oh, I know, and that's part of the dilemma. But that also shows the slow path of progress. I mean, it does take those setbacks and going forth and stuff in order for us to get there. And I think that the challenges are necessary, because if the challenges weren't there, we would not act. I always say if the roof did not leak, we would not fix it. So the roof is leaking, we've got to fix it. So we've got to get ourselves together in that regard. And I think that Saturn in particular is I mean, it's often given, you know as well as I do, it's given a bad rap in astrology, but I actually think of it as our saving grace in many ways, because it does hold our feet to the fire. It does make us be responsible. It does make us rise up and take action.
Yeah, my Saturn's one of my all-time favorite planets. I have Saturn in Capricorn early in my 6th house.
Okay, good.
I've got, Venus and Mars conjoined in Capricorn. So there's a lot of number 10 energy, whether it's Saturn or Capricorn. And that's what lets me get so much done. I've been a very productive person through the course of my life, and it's that my ability just to keep it going, keep the structure going, keep the daily stuff happening. And I attribute that to the fact that I've developed a really good relationship with my Saturn.
Yeah, it's very good for Saturn. And I have Saturn in a very awkward position, directly opposing my sun. But I think that has been it's been, obviously it was when I was younger, it was a sort of a departure from my father, which is natural. And my father was a minister, and so here I am studying astrology. He's a minister. Obviously, we're at odds with each other. He didn't believe in it, and I didn't try to convince him otherwise. But it shows that sort of inner battle there. But what I find ultimately, he's long gone, of course, but ultimately, I find myself doing similar work as he did, but just through a different medium. That's what it comes down to, just a different vehicle, a different platform. And so therefore, and I do see it, because I have it in my first house. It's very much it's very much of a responsibility sort of plan. I'm a very responsible person. I had to, I have to raise 3 children by myself. If my wife passed away about 20 years ago, and so I had to raise 3 children by myself. And had I not had that Saturn in the first house in Libra, that responsible Saturn in Libra in the first house, I'm not sure I could have pulled it off. But it was my saving grace. So I've always thought of Saturn as a good friend to have in my back pocket.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think all the planets can be your best buddy if you do the work to deal with their shadow side and get that cleared up, and then you can take them to their bright, shiny side.
Exactly. I think the same way. I really do feel the same way, because I think it oftentimes gets, and then just, it's often true that, the hard work does yield the greatest result in the end, simply by virtue of the hard work that you put in. You reach a point of arrival. You sort of arrive at that moment in time. And I do think that timing in astrology is incredibly important, because we can see the potential perhaps in the birth chart. We can see there's this potential for a person, but a series of events, I think, often have to come into play in order for that to really blossom and come into fruition. And that can vary widely through people's lives. We see people attaining fame and fortune, or even just success. And that success is obviously dictated by many people's own different standards and definitions. So it doesn't necessarily always mean that it has to be money or resources or big houses. Success can be just peace of mind. And as we get to that point, we find ourselves, those times happen very differently. There's some people don't arrive at fame until they're very late in their life, or a success or a place of peace. Yeah.
When I was first studying astrology under Kelly Lee Phipps, my mentor, who is now passed.
I know Kelly. I used to know him very well. Yeah.
Yeah. We did a 2-hour podcast when I was studying under him. It was sort of my public mentorship.
Yeah.
And we would always do a famous person's chart, and we would study the natal chart and the key transits of when that person had their things they were best known for, their greatest positive breakthroughs. And just about every time, it was a quadrature hit from an outer planet.
Interesting. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
It up.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's right. I forgot. I mean, I remember talking to Kelly years ago. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll get back to that subject, because he was an interesting guy. We're talking today with Benjamin Bernstein, and his website is astroshaman.com, ASTROSHAM. A-M-N-M-A-N, Astro Shaman, just like it says, astroshaman.com. And we'll take a quick break here. We're talking about Saturn and Neptune and its relevance to the law of attraction, as well as other topics that sort of pop through our two astrologers' minds. So bear with us. We'll be back in about 2 minutes, and we'll pick up the conversation.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is Benjamin Bernstein. He's an astrologer out of North Carolina, I believe, and his website is astroshaman.com. And we're talking today about the Saturn-Neptune law of attraction. And before we get started back into that conversation, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about Kelly Lee Phipps, because I remember he did a movie called The Return of the Magi, if I recall.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I had him on a guest. This was way back. This was back around probably 2007, 2008. And I know that he had died of a brain tumor, which was very near to me because that's what my wife also passed away from.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was a brain tumor. So, and I knew, and I followed his journey on Facebook until he could no longer communicate. So I was very familiar with what was going on, and I tried to offer as much as I could in the way of advice and support for him, because it's a debilitating disease. But I'm interested to hear that you had that experience with him, because he was really quite a gifted guy, I thought.
Well, he was so instrumental in my life because I had moved to Asheville, North Carolina in 2001 after a 20-year sales career back in Oklahoma, and I was following my dream of being a professional singer-songwriter at the time.
Wow.
And tried that, and I'd been there doing that a couple of years in Asheville, and then I met him at an open mic. He was doing his wild man poetry. And we met and just clicked. I mean, for a while we were absolute best friends.
That's
for several
great.
years.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry for your loss, though, but still a great influence to have and a great way to be turned on to a whole new field. And, of course, once you get the bug of astrology, it's very hard to shake.
Well, that's what happened because he, at that point, had no interest in astrology at all, despite having been married to an astrologer years before, but just not interested. And then Kelly does a reading for me and blows me away. It sounds like he's hired someone to follow me around.
Yeah.
And I take his beginning class, I light up, and all of a sudden I'm just cooking, and I spend the next 2 years just deep diving into astrology until he tells me I'm ready to hang out my shingle.
Yeah,
so
that's great. Wow.
that was my first big career transition after moving to Asheville.
Yeah, interesting. And then, it's funny how people arrive here. And is it in your chart? Does it show that you have the ability to, or the potentiality to be an astrologer? Is it strong?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, for sure, the sun in Aquarius and Uranus rising early in the first house. Uranus, of course, rules Aquarius. I'm sorry, Uranus rules astrology, as does Aquarius.
Right.
And Uranus even opposes my sun.
Yeah.
And the sun itself is in the 7th house of relating one-on-one. It's tightly conjunct Chiron, mentoring and healing. Yeah, it's a good fit.
It's a good fit. It's a good fit. Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, it's interesting how many people have it. I have Uranus conjunct my moon in Cancer in my 10th house, a very close conjunction. So it seems as if my career is meant to be there. And I'm a Virgo rising with a Gemini midheaven. So I've got the gift of gab as part of it. And it just seems this is a fusing of many of my skill sets into one thing, either being podcast. And so it's interesting that way. And it sort of manifests itself in many ways. I was talking to my good friend Ariel Gutman out the other day. And actually the tagline for my podcast is actually Astrology, Art, and Spiritual Adventure, because I like to be able to open it up into other categories as well, which I think are, they sort of dovetailed nicely with astrology, like numerology and tarot and shamanism and all these things. They all have they all are intermingled and they work well, they play well with each other. And so that's why I like the idea of having that umbrella. And then she said, that really speaks to who you are as an individual, because you have all these characteristics about myself, and it's in my chart. Mm-hmm. That's why astrology is so valuable and so much of a great tool for people. I'd love to see it being used in high schools as a guidance counseling tool, just to help people figure out which way they could go. But that's such a terrible, sort of a hard road to hoe. And I think we're making progress with astrology overall. I think that we'll see, perhaps maybe not in our lifetimes, maybe so, but maybe in a few more decades, we could see astrology taking on a different role, I guess, as it becomes more and more relevant for people.
Yeah, it is. It seems to be growing steadily in popularity for quite a while, so it's definitely on the upward trend.
Well, the internet has certainly helped. There's no question. It's helped us and it's hurt us in many ways. I mean, it's in some ways it's helped us because it's obviously elevated its profile to the rest of the world and interest in people. But by the same token, it's also let people on their own to go do their own readings of sort of captured, phrases and stuff like that, and sort of made their own. So it's not the same as sitting down with a live person and trying to get your reading done, because there's so much intuition and character that goes into it, and the stories that are rich that are there.
Yeah.
And you really need a person to do it. You can't really do it via a web or an application of some sorts.
I agree, but I'm still grateful to Alan Leo, who 100 years ago created sun sign astrology as a marketing tool to get it in the papers.
Yeah, I am too.
It has enough validity, even though you're having to interpret for 1/12 of the world's population. There's still enough truth if you speak broadly enough that it can resonate with people and really hit the nose once in a while. And there are enough of them that will then go deeper to a more serious thing. They may start with a computer report, but eventually a lot of them work their way to the live astrologers. So it's a wonderful feeder system, at least.
Yeah, it is, and I think the idea that the sun sign, it does work. I mean, I do a sun sign astrology column each week, and I hear from people all the time, and I always I say, well, just temper that by reading your rising sign too, or read your moon sign. Put the two together. You'll see that theme throughout your life, or that week, or whatever the time period is. So I'm always attracted to it, because it still does work. I mean, it really does work, which is fascinating about it. Well, getting back to the Saturn Neptune. I really want to drill in a little bit more about the law of attraction and how you, because it is sort of it has all the trappings in some way of sort of what I would call a new age, like The Secret or anything else, sort of the new age trappings of what, sort of wish and it'll be true sort of thing. And a lot of people sort of swallow the Kool-Aid on that, but there's really hard work involved, I think, as well. It's not just you don't just go out and read the book and boom, you wake up and you got whatever you want. There's much more involved in it. And so I'm curious how you feel about that as well.
Well, let me just stick in here. I used to recommend as my favorite law of attraction book, The Attractor Factor, volume, second edition by Joe Vitale, but I've replaced it recently. I came across an amazing channeled book, and the title is Creating Money, Attracting Abundance, and the primary author is Sanaya Roman, and she channeled it with her partner, who she channels a number of books with. The book is amazing. I mean, it's just the most simple, clear presentation of the material, easy step-by-step how to do this. And the book has sold over 500,000 copies. It's translated into something like 24 languages. I mean, it is. I just don't know of a better. Certainly, no book that has resonated better for me or given me better outcomes than this particular volume.
And are there hard, fast steps that you can take that allow you to get this? That allow you to get this?
Hard, fast isn't exactly right. One thing that the book says is, these are guidelines and ways that have worked, but they also say, it's not a rigid thing. Mm-hmm. For example, some people say you visualize every day until it comes around, but they say you hold the vision of what you want until you feel a click inside and you just somehow intuitively know it's set in motion and you don't need to do anything else. Mm-hmm. You just wait and then it shows up, at the right time.
Right. Because oftentimes I find people are their own worst enemies when it comes to this because they want the quick fix. They want they don't want to go through the work involved to get to the next level. And that's oftentimes what is frustrating, I would think, for people who don't understand that. That's just, there is no real quick fix. There's always work involved. Let's put it that way.
Well, for most, I have met some people who just magically seem to draw in with little or no effort. Mm-hmm. But those are pretty evolved people. So I will say there are always exceptions to all axioms like that, but I would agree that most of the time, a certain amount of effort. I'll tell you my own approach when I look back on the things I've accomplished in my life. It's just because I've got a lot of Capricorn and Virgo energy, but I just kept going. In the last several months, I've dived deep into business learning as I've retooled my business model, doing business coaching and reading tons of books and podcasts on business strategies and particulars on that. And what I keep hearing is it's just about persistence. It's about, you may, even if you have the vaguest sense, if you can take one baby step toward that general direction, then you've got momentum. And what I keep hearing, and in my own experience, it's momentum that's the key.
It is.
If it's okay, I'll share a brief story of my own life and how that actually worked out. I can keep it pretty tight.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. I'd love to hear it.
So basically, until I was 41, I lived in Oklahoma. And for the last 20 of those years, I was in sales. Mm-hmm. But the last several years, I worked for a food service company calling on the distributors and larger restaurants and such. But, I just kept thinking, man, I'm supposed to be a singer-songwriter. And I was dying inside. I was really getting kind of depressed. And so I finally got the courage up to cut the cord and quit this really good-paying job and move here to Asheville to be a singer-songwriter full-time. I did not get a day job. And I had some money saved up, so I had some cushion for a while. But I jumped in, gave it everything I had, and completely failed. I never even began to make a living as a musician, even though I had gotten fairly good. But what happened is I had momentum. My train was on the express track going towards singer-songwriter, but at the same time, having, been interested in spirituality and such since the age of 17, I was also listening from within. I said, okay, it appears that singer-songwriter is what I want, but Spirit, if you got a better idea, tell me and I'll shift. Mm-hmm. I'm always open to, being guided for what serves highest good that I hadn't thought of before. And then Kelly came along and I got onto the astrology track. And once I hung up my astrology single, I pretty well hung up the professional guitar. I said, this just isn't working. And it was all astrology for a few years. And then a friend invited me to a shamanic ceremony, the San Pedro cactus ceremony. And I did that, and it rocked my world, opened me to a level of inner reality I had never even suspected was there.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, I start doing that, and then I learned about ayahuasca and begin diving deep with a shaman and doing lots of ayahuasca ceremonies. And then in one of those ceremonies, ayahuasca calls me to be a shaman. Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay, I'll be a shaman. So I continue developing on that path, and then later ayahuasca pops in these little invocations that a person can literally just say a 7 or 8 word sentence, relax, and literally call in their own embodied awakening or their own healing on any level. And I've been sharing that tool for years and years too. So it's like once I just got the momentum up and that first movement toward I'm going to be a singer-songwriter, I didn't end up in that as a career, but because I was passionately pursuing it with all of my energy and enthusiasm, I eventually got to the right place. And I've learned, like I get clients sometimes who are just massively Virgo in one way or another.
Right.
And I feel like I've got to have it all planned out before I can even begin. And that's not how it works in my experience.
No. And the thing is that you can still be a singer-songwriter as well. You can have many occupations and you can still enjoy it. So you shouldn't, be dismayed by that. But while we're on the subject of Neptune, because Neptune really does fall into this, I'd love to talk about ayahuasca, because I have had people on who I've done whole podcasts on the subject of ayahuasca alone, and I've never done it myself, and yeah, I'm very, very curious about it. And one of the things that's fascinated me about it is how this formula came to be. And I've read a book, I think it's called The Eye of the Serpent, if it was one of the works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea was that the plants actually taught the people how to create the formula, because it's such an unusual, esoteric, and diverse.
Oh yeah,
odd
there's
formula.
no way you would have got that by trial and error.
You couldn't, well, you would have had a lot of errors, I think, is what would have happened. You would have had a lot of people kick in the bucket, perhaps, or getting very violently sick because they ate the wrong thing. So that's a fascinating subject in itself. I mean, how does the universe provide this for us in a way, and then get that information translated to the people? I mean, how?
Well, I can tell you how it works if you're interested.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Basically, in shamanic societies that have a close connection with the earth, humans and plants communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. When I'm in an ayahuasca ceremony, she often will talk to me. We will have internal conversations in English, and I can understand everything she's saying, and she can understand me. Let me bullet point. This is my elevator concise. How do you describe ayahuasca? Okay. Ayahuasca, in the physical world, it's a combination of two plants boiled down to a thick brew like a tea. But what it really is ayahuasca is a hyper-intelligent, multi-dimensional consciousness that extends everywhere from the sacrament you consume all the way up to absolute union with God.
Interesting.
That's my experience. And when you are connected and you have the consciousness of communicating with the plants teach you things. Mm-hmm. Any good herbalist who's really deep into it, even if they're not doing psychoactive things, has a communion with the plants, and there is a energetic connection in that level. Teaching happens from the plant to the human. And my understanding of how ayahuasca formula came about, tobacco taught them. Actually, I believe the fable, or it may have been that happened, is a very powerful tobacco shaman died, and out of 1 foot, and they were laid down on the ground. At the base of 1 foot grew the ayahuasca vine, and out of the other foot grew the chacruna leaf, and those are the two plants that make the ayahuasca. So it was, I believe it was the spirit of tobacco, which is a very powerful and positive plant ally if used properly. I use a tobacco tea every day that is a very powerful ally for me, and it's not the least bit addictive or carcinogenic the way I do it. The tobacco teaches me all the time. If I'm in a world of hurt energetically, then the tobacco can clear away whatever that energetic problem is. And so as a shaman, I know that the plants are extremely powerful allies, and they can get you cleared of stuff when nothing else seems to work.
So you brew a tea from tobacco leaves, right?
Yeah. I actually get the tobacco from Peru. It's and you chop up a little bit and you literally just boil it like a tea for a while, and it creates a tobacco tea. And the particular practice I'm referring to is singa, where you actually take a shell and you actually drink the tea through your nose, left side for clearing, the right side for calling in energies.
Wow! So you use it like a neti pot to do that?
That's similar, but except you swallow.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
You actually, you do it through the nose, because when the tobacco tea goes right up there next to the brain through the nasal passage, right, it can have a very powerful immediate effect.
Goes right into
the brain.
Amygdala, yeah. So you're basically snorting coffee in the morning. I mean, it's snorting tobacco, rather. It sounds like.
I know. That would be, not really. It's actually, you just lift the shell and you gently pour, and it just sort of pours down your nose and your throat.
And what's the effect that has on you?
Say what?
What's the effect it has on you?
There is. Now, to be fair, I wake up every morning in an altered state anyway. I've done so much plant spirit work and have worked on my awakening for so many years that I am just always in an altered state compared to most people. Mm-hmm. But what the tobacco does is it enhances that, and it's, how can I verbalize this? The tobacco tea expands the bliss and euphoria. Again, really facilitates the clearing of any heavy energies that are sticking to me. Mm-hmm. And tobacco, is the plant par excellence for prayer. That's why the Native Americans, tie little bits of it up in their sweat lodges, and why tobacco is such a central part of so many shamanic and indigenous cultures, because when you pray to tobacco, it has a tremendous power to bring it about. The amazing thing, let me tell you a story that might illustrate this idea. The origin story of the powers of tobacco is when the world was made and the plants were all lining up in front of Creator to get their particular abilities and gifts, tobacco was very last in line, and he heard what all the other plants asked for one by one, and he comes up last, and Creator says, well, tobacco, what would you like to do? And he said, I want to do everything they do.
Right. And you can see why tobacco would be that vehicle, because it's part of it's an ancient plant and has very strong qualities to it. That sort of, it's a unifying quality, I think, in itself. Sort of the way perhaps cannabis is in the same regard, because it does bring people together. They can use it as a ceremonial, figurehead, so to speak.
Yeah. And actually, in our bodies, there are things actually called nicotinic receptors that are actually wired to receive tobacco. I mean, it's literally in our biology.
Wow.
Amazing.
Wow, that is incredible.
But what tobacco has, because it said, I want to do it all, it is the most versatile of all the plants for prayer. You can literally play for almost anything. Tobacco can help bring it to you. I use tobacco in my law of attraction practice. And also, if you want a state change, like I'm feeling a certain way, I want to feel this other way, for me, tobacco can facilitate that change very rapidly.
When you do it in that form, is it addictive?
Not at all. I never have a physical craving at all.
Okay, so this is not American tobacco, as you said. This is from Peru, so it's much more pure, I imagine, more closer to the original meaning of it, and the meaning.
Yeah,
it's not been altered.
I'm expecting it's also grown in a more sacred way.
Of course.
It's also much more potent. The tobacco from Peru that I get from shamansmarket.com has like 18 times the nicotine content of American tobacco. It's very powerful.
Interesting, and yet you don't find it to be addictive, because nicotine is the addictive quality, isn't it?
Well, when smoked into the lungs, yeah. But, no shaman I know would ever inhale tobacco. We will use tobacco orally, but we draw it in just enough into the mouth, and then we charge it with intention, and then we blow it out to create a certain shamanic effect. But we don't bring it into our lungs.
Interesting. I never thought of tobacco in that regard. This is a very strongly shamanic practice, then, right? This is something that
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. And the effect that it has on you is, do you think that it is an extension or something that revives sort of the ayahuasca imprint that you had initially? Does this sort of tap into that same?
It's not a direct correlation, but tobacco can basically enhance whatever state change you request.
Yeah, wow.
And it's incredibly receptive to prayer.
Huh. Interesting.
And it's just like the shaman I learned how to make it from said tobacco is like the Swiss Army knife of the plants.
Interesting. That's interesting way of usefulness.
Through prayer, it can do almost anything you want it to do. When used in a good, healthful, shamanic way, like I'm describing.
Right. Yeah. So it's got a sense of relevance. It's revealed. It's regarded highly, and it's revered. That's what I meant to say. It's revered and used in a ceremonial setting. It would be much more powerful in its influence, I think. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Like in Peru, there are shamans who are called tabaqueros, and tobacco is the only thing they use for healing.
Mm-hmm.
They use it in smoke form. They use it in liquid form, but that's all they need to create powerful healing. So it is considered one of the master plant teachers of South America, along with ayahuasca and San Pedro and things like that.
Wow, and then of course that grows in its natural form. So somebody had to teach mankind, the plants had to teach mankind that it was something that they could use, and they henceforth went forth and used it.
Yeah, and again, the plants taught the humans, because the humans, until recent history, until the Enlightenment, so to speak, were connected with the natural world. There was communication, and there's a vast intelligence of Mother Earth and all of her plants.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I've gotten a little more open to as a shaman, was being able to receive some of that information more than I used to. I'm not at a level that a lot of other shamans I know are at in that particular regard, but I know enough that the plants have tremendous wisdom. You might think, well, it's just a plant growing in the ground. How could it be? But if you look at it with spiritual vision, that physical body of the plant is the tiniest part of it. It also extends into the other mystical realms, and in those realms, it's a huge, magnificent, vastly intelligent being. A lot of these plants are.
Yeah. Wow, that's
you can't
fascinating.
judge it by its physical tip of the iceberg.
Fascinating. I'm glad we meandered this way because it's enlightening to me. And I'm really, I would love to meet you in person and go through one of these ceremonies with you. I think you'd be a good guide for someone like myself to go through a shamanic routine. I think you'd be the right person. So maybe I will be down to visit you someday. Who knows?
I'd love it.
Yeah. Well, getting back to our topic, just real quickly so we can wrap up. The idea of the Neptune Saturn, I think. And in the sort of the law of attraction idea that we had initially started out our conversation with, I think it really does play into it very nicely. And I wonder how that will look over the coming years, especially as, perhaps, when Saturn conjuncts Neptune in another, 14 years, whatever it is, what that will be like if they get to that point, which I believe they do, how that will manifest, and if that will be sort of a culmination of this point of time with the spirit of law of attraction.
Oh, I don't know that law of attraction has an ultimate culmination. I mean,
well,
Saturn,
yeah,
Neptune,
well, I mean, maybe widely used as a tool or something like that. Perhaps.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, all these classic law of attraction books all were published during Saturn and Neptune quadrature aspects.
Right.
So I guess if we're going to predict one thing, it's that whenever they next make their next quadrature, and the next one will be, when Saturn and Neptune conjoin again.
You're right, right.
I can almost guarantee you there'll be another thing like The Secret or something like that, where law of attraction becomes a big deal again.
Or another sort of a variation on a theme. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Well, what have you got lined up? Let's just get into your website for a real quick minute here before we sign off. What have you got going on as far as you have what sort of services do you offer, and what sort of events do you have coming up on your calendar that people might like to know about?
Okay. So just out of curiosity, when will this podcast actually air?
This will probably air on this Friday. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the site again is astroshaman.com. My core services, I do what I call Astrology Plus, which is astrology, which can be just astrology, or we can mix in some shamanic healing or some invocations for healing or awakening. I also do just straight up shamanic healing. That's just the shamanic healing part of it. I also am a life coach, so people can do that with me as well. Mm-hmm. So those are my main one-on-one services. What I'm super excited about right now is the very soon to launch online astrology mentoring membership, which again, if they'll just go to the 4th section of the homepage, and they'll see a post there called Astrology Mentoring Membership Forming Now. Again, that's going to be divided into 3 groups: beginner, intermediate, advanced. Mm-hmm. And we're, my plan at this point, we're still kind of working out all the details, but I'm expecting it to be a weekly event where we'll all get together as a group for 1 to 2 hours. The time will be chosen by the group itself to make sure it works best for anyone. If you miss it, it will be archived as a video or an MP3. And we'll work with the material the students bring. And so that it's really relevant for them. There will also be a group, not a Facebook group, but a private group where it's just us guys and gals doing the astrology, where you can interact with the fellow students all the time. We'll form a little community of astrologers there who are learning together. There will be fun assignments between the weeks. Let's work on this and talk about it next time, a celebrity chart or something that we're all interested in doing. Mm-hmm. It's going to be juicy and fun.
Yeah, that's what you want. You're an animated guy. I can tell you got a lot of energy coming out of you. So it'll be a fun situation for people. And I think that's what astrology should be. I mean, it should be fun. It is work, but I think once you get the bug, it's not that hard after all. Because it's hard, yes, but I'm saying it's not that difficult to be pulled into it because it is so engaging of a modality. It just really rings a lot of bells on people's charts because it's got so much accuracy and so much important information for your own purpose there. It's really incredibly relevant. Well, that's great. I do like the idea of the Saturn Neptune is a wonderful it's a wonderful construct. I think they really I think if used properly, they really sort of augment each other and sort of scratch each other's back, for lack of a better word. I think it's a really it's a useful. I think what it is, it's a useful way to address Neptune through the lens, using the Saturn as the lens to look through. It's a great way to look through to see Neptune. Somewhere in there's a right phrase, but I think that Saturn is the right way to look at Neptune. Let's put it that way. It's a responsible, positive, outgrowing way of looking at Neptune, and bringing that together does allow us to sort of advance ourselves in a progressive and expansive way that works for all of us. So.
Yeah, can I throw in a little PS on those two? Just a different, wonderful way to use Saturn and Neptune together. My actual favorite way, even more than law of attraction, is Neptune and Saturn can combine to form embodied awakening.
Okay, yeah.
Where you are walking around in your daily life and you are full-blown aware of your own higher self at the same time. You've merged with your consciousness. And if people want to do that, I actually have a how-to on my site, and I'll tell them quickly how to get to that. On astroshaman.com, there's a menu bar at the top of the screen. The last word on it is invocations. And if they click that or tap that, it'll take them to a page that has 2 posts. The first one, Invocations for Healing and Awakening, tells them A to Z how to do this, how to literally invoke their own higher self using 8 words and just becoming passive and relaxing. The other post is called Your Negative Reactions, Golden Opportunities for Clearing and Awakening, how to work with the challenging emotions and physical sensations that come up and understand them for the invitations to healing and awakening that they really are. So if those ideas are intriguing to anyone, that section of my site is really interesting if you want to dive into awakening and healing in a simple DIY format.
Oh, that's great. Good news to know. It's great news to know. Again, my guest today has been Benjamin Bernstein, and his website is astroshaman, ASTROSHAMAN.com. Astroshaman, just like it sounds, astroshaman.com. Thank you, Benjamin, for coming on today. It's been great speaking with you. I've really enjoyed our conversation, especially since we were able to sort of divert a little bit and meander. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. My great pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.